The pulsing vibration on my leg quickly became annoying. I had ignored it a few times and fallen right back to sleep, but now it seemed to never stop. A groan escaped my lips as I pried my eyes open. It took several attempts to blink away the blurriness and focus on my surroundings. I was still at Lizzie's. What was vibrating? It felt like I gasped and snapped awake, ignoring the horrible aching in my skull. My hand darted toward my hollow, which had finally ceased pleading for my attention. Please don't let it be V. Please don't let it be V. Shit! I looked at the time displayed on the top of the screen. It was nearly 4 a.m. Fuck, I'd scared the shit out of her and she was having a full-blown panic attack. And it was all my fault. I cursed under my breath as my fingers dashed across the screen, typing a reply to let her know I was okay and leaving now before she made good on her threat to call the badges. As soon as the message was on its way, I shot out of my chair and snatched my jacket off the desk. I nearly tripped rushing up the stairs and sprinted across the abandoned dance floor. This wasn't the first time I'd pulled an all-nighter, but I had never passed out like that before, and I had certainly never forgotten to tell V about it. But when the door opened and I stepped outside, I skidded to a halt. It was dead silent, and there wasn't a person to be seen. I turned around, hoping Rita might still be standing outside, ready to scare me like always. But there was no one there, and the door had closed shut and locked itself behind me. I was trapped. Wait, no I wasn't. What kind of thinking was that? My ticket home was waiting for me right where I had left it, and it wasn't like I had to venture all the way through the garage. I'd waited nearly an hour to snag space next to the entrance. All I had to do was get there. I forced my feet to move and caught myself wishing several times I could turn back to Lizzie's, but there was no salvation to be found there. I had to press forward. Right foot, left foot. I slowed as I approached and carefully scanned every inch of the area, looking for the hidden figures I knew were waiting for me.
You never even knew we were there, did you?
A shiver raced up my spine. I could hear that horrible whining in my ears again. Or was that tinnitus from having drunk myself into a stupor? They were indistinguishable, though this ringing didn't seem to be growing any louder. I could see my van, tantalizingly close, and yet so far away.
Come on, Judy. Get a fucking grip.
I suddenly lurched forward and raced towards the door, certain I would collapse to the ground any moment and find myself writhing in agony before I could reach it. They would nab me again, and the whole ordeal would repeat itself, and I deserved it for being so fucking stupid as to just walk right back into the same situation. But I was still upright when I reached the van and wrenched the door open. I jumped into the seat and slammed the door shut behind me before slapping my palm against the lock. The ringing had been replaced with the sound of blood rushing through my ears in ragged gasps. I jerked my head from side to side, searching for anyone who might emerge from the shadows. No one did. Finally, I thrust my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. This was always going to be a hard day. Diving right back into things had seemed easier and faster than trying to slowly acclimate myself to my old life, but fuck, I had not been prepared for it at all. But tomorrow would be easier if I simply paced myself. When I felt like my heart wasn't about to burst from my chest, I started the van and set off for home. The roads were abandoned, yet I seemed to get caught at every light. As I pulled to a stop at the intersection of Kennedy and Charter, my hollow buzzed again, and V's reply appeared on my HUD. Even though it was only cold text I was reading, I could still feel every ounce of relief and anger in her message. Why hadn't I called her before I'd gone on my bender? Why had I done this in the first place? My mind searched for answers as the light turned green and I put my foot on the gas. I would have a lot of explaining to do. Too much, if I told her the truth. But it would be easy to bend the facts a little and say I'd simply gotten carried away. The cabin of my van suddenly filled with a blinding light. For a brief moment, I heard the high-pitched screeching of tires against pavement drawing closer before the door suddenly caved in with a sickening crash. Shards of glass sprayed against my skin as I was violently thrown to the side. The seatbelt became a vise, constricting my ribs and causing a sharp stab of pain to radiate throughout my abdomen. Metal continued scraping against metal. I gripped onto the steering wheel for dear life as the side of the van briefly lifted off the ground before dropping back onto the road. After jostling a few times, everything went still. The smell of burning oil filled my nostrils as I tried to catch my breath. I carefully shifted back into my seat. The entire door was folded inward. When I looked through the open space that had once been the window, I saw another car a few feet away. Its entire front end was crumpled like an accordion, though I could see faint movement behind the cracked windshield. Fuck. Stars swam at the edges of my eyes. I don't remember when I called the badges, or even if I called them, but blue and red lights were soon flashing around me. Voices were speaking, including my own, though they were all distant and disconnected. The low rumble of a motorcycle approaching reached my ears. Perhaps this was some weird fever dream I couldn't wake from? "Hey," a man's voice called out. "You alright?" What? I was standing on the side of the road with a bright light shining in my eyes, forcing my pupils to contract. "Can you hear me?" "Yeah." "Good. It looked like you were zoning out there for a sec. You sure you didn't get bumped on the head?" Had I? How was I supposed to know? My eyes focused on the badge adorning the man's uniform. When had I gotten out of the van? "Why don't you sit down here on the curb?" he directed. "I'm gonna talk with my partner for a minute." "Okay." As I looked back at the mangled mess the side of my van had become, I gasped as an unsettling realization settled in. I'd been in an accident, the badges were talking to me, and I was drunk. Oh, fuck. I lowered my head into my hands as I broke out into a cold sweat. The ground began spinning for a very different reason. This wouldn't be some petty pinch where I could just fork over a few eddies to get the badge off my case. This was serious. My van was fucked up. The other car was fucked up. I was fucked up. And the other driver, shit, what had happened to them? Were they alive? Dead? Was I going to be looking at a year in lockup? Decades? I was about to sob when I heard footsteps approaching. "Judy!" My eyes shot up. I spotted V darting across the chaotic scene towards me. "V." I tried to stand up, but V was kneeling in front of me before I knew it. "Jesus Christ, are you alright?" No. I wasn't alright. Everything, my entire life, was about to end, and it was all my fault. How would V take care of herself if I was locked up? Fuck, I couldn't bear to think of her sitting in the apartment alone every night. It was all my fault. I think so. Oh, thank fuck. I was so scared the whole drive over here. V studied me closely, examining every cut and bruise that marked my skin. She paused at my wrists, her brow briefly narrowing before she looked back at me. "How did you know I was here?" My voice felt oddly detached from my body. The concern in her eyes quickly filled me with worry. Why was she looking at me like that? "Judy, you called me, remember?"
No.
"Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just kinda out of it." "Judy, are you sure you're okay? You seem really dazed. You're scaring me." She wasn't the only one who was scared. All it had taken was a few seconds and a few too many drinks to turn our lives upside down. I nearly chuckled to myself when I remembered telling V that she was the one who was like an anchor on our relationship. Could I let her go? I hated myself for even thinking that, but I needed to consider it. Despite everything, the arguments, the secrets, the drugs, the lies, I still loved her, and I knew in my heart she loved me too. She loved me so much that if I was taken away from her, she would be gutted in a way I didn't know she could recover from. I had hoped by keeping things quiet I might protect her, and now, despite my best efforts, I would end up hurting her anyway. It was all my fault. I realized V was staring at me nervously. As I was about to speak, she rested a comforting hand on my shoulder and stood. She needs trauma team. No, V, I shouted, springing to my feet. Judy, what the fuck are you doing? Sit down. I'm all right, V. Just a little banged up is all. Really. But more footsteps were already approaching. It was the same badge I'd talked to a moment before. This was it. Everything had led us to this horrible moment, and the only future now awaiting me was in the back of a squad car, facing years behind bars. He regarded me for a moment before turning to V. Is she all right? Yes. I made sure my voice was louder than V's reply so I wouldn't be drowned out. The badge's eyes darted between us. Look, if you want me to call trauma, I can do that, but I can't promise you this guy's got any kind of insurance that would cover expenses. If he doesn't, and judging from the fact that he's as high as an AV, I'd say that's very likely, you're gonna be left holding the bag. Those fuckers at NCMC won't even take your temperature without a down payment or a subscription plan in good standing. I blinked, trying to understand what he was talking about. Insurance? That's bullshit, V huffed. This fucker almost kills someone, and we're the ones who gotta pay out of pocket? The badge shrugged. I'm sorry. This is just the way it works. We can administer a max doc if you think it'll help. While V and the badge continued arguing, I looked back towards my van. The light had been green, and it was the front end of his car, not mine, that was totaled. He was the one at fault, not me. It wasn't my fault. Relief washed over me as I realized I wasn't about to go to prison. V stopped her shouting and turned to me. I kept my voice calm and measured. I'm all right. Really. Let me just take the max doc so I can get home. It hurt to see the frustration behind V's eyes. It obviously hurt her to be unable to afford trauma service for ourselves. Everything she'd done, bearing witness to all the ugliness Night City had to offer and more, and she couldn't even get her output medical care when it was needed. I reached out and rested a hand on her arm. Please, V. It's okay. I just want to go home. V couldn't argue with that, no matter how much she wanted to. Her shoulders slumped as she looked back at the badge. Give her the max doc, I guess. The badge nodded and started back to his vehicle. I looked at V. Her eyes had become narrow slivers and were focused on the other driver. He was handcuffed and was being led toward the back of a squad car. His limbs floundered about, and it took 2 badges to keep him upright as he was crudely tossed inside. The light had been green, and the front of his car was smashed in, not mine. When the badge returned, he held out a small inhaler. 1 puff, he directed. I did as he said and let out a long sigh as the aching pain in my abdomen quickly ebbed. My vision sharpened. I hadn't realized things were still blurry, as a surge of endorphins flooded my system. Can I take her home? V asked. Yeah, we've got her statement. A long yawn escaped the badge's lips. We'll get the other one from the driver once he sobers up. But there won't be anything else you need to do. This one's open and shut. We're going to have the van towed to the yard at the intersection of Fairley and Hartwell. Do you know where that is? Yeah, I replied. When had I given a statement? All right, we've got your deets and we'll call you if he does happen to have insurance. But if not, you're going to be on your own with repairs. Unfucking believable, V spat. Well, thanks for your cooperation, he said before casting a scornful glance at V and wandering back to the scene. A tow truck had pulled up behind my van. Come on, Jude. Let's get you home. I let V lead me across the street to where she had parked her bike. As we got closer, she came to an abrupt halt. Can you even get on this thing? I looked at V. Her eyes were glistening and there was a tone of crushing defeat in her voice. I was an incredible piece of shit. I'd gotten shit-faced, scared the fuck out of V not once but twice, and even if it wasn't my fault, the light was green. It didn't change the fact that she'd barely slept a wink and was now worrying about whether or not I might slip off her bike, and it was all because I had needed to get drunk. Yeah, I assured her with a small smile. Just maybe I sit in the front and you can sit behind me. That way, you can still drive, and I won't be holding on to you. Does that work?" Her eyes perked up a little. "I can do that. I'll go slow. At least we're close to home." I nodded and cautiously straddled the front of the bike. The Max Dock was definitely helping, but I could already feel a nasty bruise spreading across my ribs which would be causing me misery tomorrow. V quickly sat behind me and started the bike. Once she was sure I wouldn't fall over the side, she threw the engine into gear and pulled away. I looked back at my van, which was now being lifted onto the bed of the tow truck. It wasn't my fault. The light had been green. Hadn't it?